delighted to have you back to this our show, Think Tech-wise Humane Architecture. This happens to be our 280th episode already, and our new on board producer Ash has our accumulated viewership number up there. Thanks for featuring that. This show is comparing the windy cities of Chicago and or Honolulu as to avoid incestuous island isolation and to look above and beyond our horizon. And for that, we're going to have two of us back in Honolulu, which is DeSoto Brown, Bishop Museum historian and archivist, and me, Martin Despang. And we're going to be with you after this short little opening jingle. Hey, DeSoto, how's it going?
Good day to you, Martin, and good day to everybody who's watching Think Tech.
You too. Likewise. So before we go back to Chicago, this is, by the way, we take a little break from having been in Boston with Matt Noblet for the last couple of shows, and we will be back there, which is what you're familiar with because some time of your youth you spent there, and you don't regret not being there, especially not at that time of the year, right?
You said it. I don't want to be anywhere but the Hawaiian Islands, particularly during the winter in the Northern Hemisphere, which is brutally cold some places. You just came back from Germany where it may not have been as cold as it was in Boston, but it's cold.
It is, yes. And someone who is from that central part of the Midwest is our dear friend and our mid-century modern master, Ron Lindgren, who we see at the bottom left and the show quote. And at the end, the last time we were talking about Chicago and Honolulu, he made a great point that we want to echo here. And we promised to show this project here, which is the last one of his firm, which was called Killingsworth, Lindgren, Stricker, and Wilson at that time. And that is designed by his colleague, Larry Stricker, who see we at the top right and at the bottom right, when he was introducing his Ihilani to us. And Ron's point was that talking skylines, some buildings try and aim to be skylines themselves, right? Because they're not just square boxes, but they try to have some topography, as the Ihilani here has when it wants to step down towards the ocean, sort of cascading down.
This is correct. And we've also seen that definitely the Halekulani, which our friend Ron designed, as it now stands after it was redesigned in the 1980s. And it also made me think of other complexes of buildings, which may have varying skyline, as you put it, of different heights, different step downs, so that they are not simply a rectangle in the sky. And all too many of our buildings do look like that, I have to say, even if they have detailing on the sides, they all are cut off on the top. And more of a variation is actually something good that's aesthetically pleasing and interesting to look at. So skylines that are created by a lot of individual buildings are good if they vary, and skylines created by one complex or one single building are also more interesting for us to look at. And that may not seem that important, but things that are interesting to look at are enhance our existence. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. And saying that, DeSoto reminds me of pointing out to the show with Larry, and this is the rendering at the top right, is by their Carlos Diniz, who was their illustrator. That was all before the computer came. This was all by hand. And Carlos basically rendered the absence of architecture and the presence of nature, which I think there were bougainvilleas. They were supposed to be planted on each floor in each planar trough. That got value engineered to every other one. And before they remodeled this into the Four Seasons, which has been now for some years, they were lazy and lame not to put the plants back in. So here we're very happy to basically present, as the image in the middle on the right column shows, that the plants are back. So yeah, we welcome that. And also I want to discuss with you, because buildings, as we know, as sympathists of Docomomo and you dealing with historic buildings, but we both, from our personal point of view, recognize and accept that buildings basically have to adapt to changing conditions. So here, what we want to look at is this restaurant canopy that's in front of the building, where there's a famous, I think, is a fish restaurant in there. And talking to Ron, and we wish he would have been with us, but he has a doctor's appointment, so just some checkup. All the best for that, Ron, and look forward to have you back. For, as you offered, when we go back to the comparison of automobiles and architecture and the Dymaxion car that you're a self-acclaimed expert in. But we talked before the show about this one here, and we both said we're rather pleased with what we see, although it is not in exactly the genetic code of the building, which is out of concrete and painted white. This one here is out of wood. But it's basically doing the same as these very generous and spacious guest room lanais do, being basically outdoor spaces. This shelters you from the main that there is to shelter from, which is not snow, where I came from, DeSoto, and you grew up around in Boston, but it's just the wind and the rain, and it does this well. And this cloth that's been put in there, you can even open and close. So this is a very great lanai made out of natural materials and just doing a good job. So we want to commend the hotel management on evolving the easy breezy tradition that this building represents. And
yeah, I could say also too, as you and I very well know, there are a lot of additions, renovations, and changes made to older buildings that frequently do not work as well, that for many reasons are either unattractive or don't go with the building, or they don't go with the traffic flow within the building, so it's difficult to get to them and all of that kind of stuff. So a successful addition is something that we want to praise because it's not always possible for people to achieve that.
Yeah. And since you rightly so mentioned what show quoted at the bottom left, Ron's Halekulani, let's go to the next slide. And remember, because the holidays are over, but some people still have the Christmas lights on, as a favorite country song of Miranda Lambert, I believe, or so. Here is the Halekulani, as it was our favorite place to get us into the holiday mood. And they're very, very tasteful, elegant, going along with the elegance of the building, Christmas decoration there. And talking Christmas, we want to thank Ron for something that we always get from him, DeSoto. Here's the envelope that he sent it with. And just want to point out this very, very classy way of how Ron writes. And he makes a line in a pencil first and then almost draws text on it. Yes. And that continues on the envelopes within the envelopes, which we see in that little colorful picture there in the center there. And I'm sure you, as much as I did, enjoyed these as every year. And they are Museum of Modern Art's Christmas fold-out cards. Mm-hmm. Really, really classy. Thank you for that.
Yes. And you can see that by that writing on the front of the envelope, Ron used to be an architect because he has beautiful handwriting that he would have used when he was labeling his architectural drawings.
And he continues to be, because he's currently been consulted by the new owner of what happens to be at Killingsworth's most famous case study house, the case study house number 25, called the Frank House. That just changed ownership. An architect bought it for a steal of $3.9 million, well worth for that building. And he reached out to Ron to consult him on that, which we're very, very happy to hear. As the Halekulani, Peter Shanklin, the hotel manager, complimenting on things, we continuously complimenting on just not changing, not becoming a victim of the novelty obsession and making it hip and new. He knows what he has and he treasures it, so he just touches it up, which is absolutely fantastic.
Yes, I agree.
Talking hospitality and good attitude. I just came from the Halekulani on my way back from my daily meeting with the turtles out at Duke's Beach and Fort Russi Park. And Terrence, the welcoming gentleman, says hi to Ron. And he gave me this year on my way to, so that I'm not dehydrating, he gave me a big bag, a big halokalani bag. And usually we're not supposed to drink in front of the camera, but this is an exception to the rule because there's all halokalani water bottles in there. So thank you very much, Terrence. Thank you very much, Ron, for having created and living such a beautiful humane place that the halokalani is.
Yeah, and let me just also point out too, I just mentioned the renovations and changes, which you have just mentioned as well. But when Ron designed the Halekulani, he designed it around the existing 1932 building, which originally was where you checked in and there were some guest rooms as well as the dining room. That was preserved and made a focus of the newer building built around it, a newer complex from the 1980s. And that's the type of thing that I personally love to see, the preservation of history, the acceptance of it, and to show it off as something that you could not replicate today. So don't just destroy it, but say, this is something that we want to preserve, and we want you to look at it and appreciate it as well.
Yeah. And people might say, why are you guys constantly talking about the same projects? Aren't there sort of other ones? And we both, together with Don Hibbert and Bill Chapman and the Emerging Generation, working on an architectural tour guide with Philip Moiser for his Dome publishing company. And I was just yesterday on a cruise. Thanks to you, you hosted my PIing mobile, and I unmoomoed and easy breezied it, and was coming back and just driving through, which we dedicated several shows to, which we call Midtown Flunk. And I was just, again, they weren't all completed by the time we did the shows, and now they are. And I'm just in continuous shock how sort of unsensitively rubber stamped they are. They really seem like one invasive species, and once it's catching on, it's just like all over the place, like these invasive plants from the floral environment. It's so. That being said, we indulge in the marvels from the past without wanting to be nostalgic, because we want to see this to be continued here. But again, that great project, the Halekulani, I was just thinking about as well, DeSoto, that it being on the ocean, right at ocean front, it also wants to be the absence of architecture and the presence of nature, of space. And it's basically buildings comprised around these courtyards. And unless you look up, you don't even see that there is buildings, that there's architecture. And then I want to point out that the water pool there at the bottom right made me think of actually coming back from Europe, the famous Piazza San Marco, St. Mark's Place in Venice, which is also a public space place that is fronting the ocean in Venice. Sometimes it gets flooded these days because of climate change, and that's the only problematic thing about the Halekulani, whether it's ocean fronting that you always point out, right? So it might have to face some challenge. But maybe it goes the same relaxed way as the Piazza San Marco. You're laughing already because what happens from time to time there?
Well, it turns, as you just said, we're looking at a reflecting pool in the Halekulani. Well, the Piazza San Marco turns into the ocean, unfortunately, and it wasn't designed to do that. And that is, again, a very severe evidence of ocean levels rising, as well as Venice, the city, actually beginning to sink as well. So what is happening in Venice is something that's going to be happening in a lot of places throughout the world that are right on the ocean. And Waikiki is right on the ocean. Waikiki is the driver of our entire economy in the state of Hawaii. So if Waikiki becomes flooded, it is going to be a major thing for us to cope with. Not if, but when. We're going to have to cope with it.
Yeah. And maybe Ron was more ahead of its time. And again, with a reference to San Marco, maybe it's better prepared than the other hotels. Who knows? Anyways, let's go back as promised to Chicago. But although there are direct flights from here to Chicago, which I took one last year, and that's where we got most of the footage of this show from, But usually I make a stopover in San Francisco. So let's do that as well and go to the next slide. Because this, as you can see him here from its back, Semi and I, when we drove back to his mom and our exotic escapism expert, Susanna, my sweetheart, we had a stopover in San Francisco. And it was long enough that we decided to take the BART, which is that public transportation that gets people from the airport to the city. And that's some 50 years later, we're finally getting as well, as we're sometimes a little behind with our heavy rail, right? And we went to the Embarcadero Center. And the Embarcadero is interesting because there are certain parallels to us in Honolulu as well. As we show quote at the top right, which project is that it's a sibling of?
Well, it's not too dissimilar in some ways to the Financial Plaza of the Pacific in downtown Honolulu. And they do both have similar origins in time, and they are both brutalist in their architectural style. Embarcadero Center is considerably larger than the Financial Plaza, but yes, there are parallels. When you're walking around in them, you can see that they are both from the same time period in the way they are designed.
Yeah. And if we're very, very particular about the timing, as we put it there, in the Honolulu one was built in 68 and Embarcadero started in 71. So we might have been a trendsetter, although, as you said, that was the zeitgeist at that time, brutalism. And it's tropical brutalism for us, and it's a little less tropical, but still relatively moderately climate-wise. Although things go crazy, we were lucky because the days after there was this massive flooding, there was this torrential rain in San Francisco. So we're just lucky to have this very beautiful day, as you can see there. Semi, as the emerging architect here, basically, when I asked him about his first impression of the Embarcadero, he basically compared it to another project where they've been looking at quite a bit when I'm back in Munich. And that is from the same time, and that's the 72 Olympics, particularly its housing project that we see show quoted at the middle on the right column there. And the prime architectural piece, masterpiece, and that's probably why he makes the connection, is at the very bottom there, the sequence of images, which is the Hyatt Hotel that John Portman did. And that has this cascading up from the inside and cascading down, just like the housing in Munich does. So really a kind of a coherent zeitgeist all through continents, which maybe these days we only have in an unfortunate way, as we see the same old glass boxes. They're very uninspired that we see all over the world, that we are not happy with, and we want to see these conditions here basically continue. So let's go and do one more flight from San Francisco to Chicago, next one. But in the same season, before we go back to the summer, which we have all year round here, and this is me many, many, many years ago when I was back in the prairie and with who is the patron of this show here, Dan Kubrick, my best buddy, who you see at the very top second from right, with me in front of a Christmas tree, which is on a plaza that dates back to the same period, late 60s, 65. One of the buildings is the Brunswick building, and I was amused to see that at the very beginning of the movie that we see at the top right, which is George Clooney and Julia Roberts in Ticket to Paradise. They don't paradise in Hawaii, but where Joey and Clara recently have been in Bali. But at the beginning, they show the city they want to escape during that time of the year in the winter, and that is Chicago. And they are in front of the Brunswick building. That is by SOM, a firm that's very familiar to us because we're blessed with two projects on the island that you had your little senior moment, rightly so, last time. It's okay. So what were they?
I don't remember again. I knew you were going to ask me, and I didn't remember.
Sorry for that. Again. Isn't that mean? So it's the School of Engineering at UH, and it is the all-time favorite Mauna Kea Beach Hotel. So
yes, that's right. That's right.
And I keep asking you that, and at some point you're gonna remember it.
I'll probably. I hope. Now that you've warned me, I know I'm going to be tested again.
And the other thing I'm gonna teasing you with is my German language, right? So there's also here embedded my weekly German lesson for you, because at the very bottom you see one of the stands, the Christmas stands.
Mhm.
And what does it say on the sign here?
Well, all I can see is, it says Schnitzel House. Then it says Taste of Germany. Taste of Germany, obviously in English, and Schnitzel House.
See that
Incorporating an English word too.
That wasn't too tough, right? That was an easy one. And then it says below there, it says Schönwald, Germany. And we asked these people, and they revealed to us that they basically come from Germany all the way. They pack all their stuff, and then they set up shop again there on the Daily Plaza, as one of the names it's called. Also, the Chicago Civic Center is the more official name. And then they make so much revenue there in these couple of weeks there that they can go back and just relax and don't need to work anymore. So a Glühwein, which is that mulled wine, is like $15 or something, but fairly you get the mug with it. Which
Okay.
Because Dan bought me one.
Okay.
So just now we return to the Windy City, because we have a very windy day. The colleague of Terrence at the Halekulani to me said, "Oh, I love it. I love the weather." And that's unique, right? They're really embracing the easy breezy outdoorsiness of the Halekulani and not saying, "Oh, it's so windy and I get cold." They really love it. In Chicago, however, that is different. Next slide, because here is your real German lesson, because the other one wasn't really one, as you admitted, right?
Yes.
And there's one word here that we don't need to translate, right? Because we borrow that from you.
Well, also, first of all, I can see that the first word in quotation marks is bomb cyclone, which is a term used in the United States now. And it also says there's a whiteout. And that's obviously taken from the United States English. So the rest of it, I'm not quite sure I can see snowstorm. I can see extreme and things like that, but you tell me what the rest of it is.
You got the gist of it. So the bold black headline translated is that U.S. citizens are staring into the whiteout.
Okay.
And what they choose, they say it here in English, well, almost. This is the skyline of the city we're looking at, right? And it's white outed, it's blurred, because there's this lake effect snow. We're talking Lake Michigan there. And then it's like that. And on the East Coast, a little further east, there was just a record low in temperatures. I think it was 78 below. That's record on history. And the real temperature is only 34 below. And this is, by the way, where the American Fahrenheit and the European Celsius, somewhere there they meet at the very lows. And then you add the wind chill to that one. And then it's not fun anymore over there. Not at all. It's brutal. I mean, it's dangerous to even go out, right? So we keep this in mind, and the audience keep in mind when we keep now going back and look at the architecture, which is the next slide. The building to the left is one of the very iconic ones from the 1930s. This is the Carbit and Carbon building. And just the name of it, DeSoto, wasn't that like, wouldn't we wish, well, not that we have that sort of, naive mindset back, but that maybe that we could have been that naive, how naively they were embracing fossil fuel, right?
Oh, absolutely.
No one was foreseeing what trouble we got ourselves into with that.
No, because at the time it seemed inexhaustible, and particularly in a place like Chicago and the city of New York, as well as other American cities. When this building was built, no high rises, no skyscrapers were being built anywhere else in the world yet, except the USA. And the USA was essentially flexing its muscles industrially and saying, look how big and strong we are, and look at our excessive use of energy and other resources to show you how big and strong we are.
Yeah.
And the rest of the world was astonished.
Absolutely. And that building couldn't more proudly demonstrate that. And the general public nicknamed it. Do you remember what they nicknamed it? They nicknamed it the champagne bottle, because the crown of it is coated with real gold. And so if we go to the next slide, which has to be our last slide because we're almost at the end of the show, but here's a couple of details of the building. It has a historic plaque that we see at the top right. So it's from 1929, and it's by the Burnham brothers, who are the sons of D.H. Burnham, who is like the father, the godfather of architecture in Chicago there. And you see just how exquisitely, detailed is it. You could not make a building like that anymore. Maybe a sheikh could build it somewhere there in Dubai, but usually, just the craftsmanship is just like not doable for, the budgets that we have. Because although, a high-rise costs a lot of money, and these, generic blue boxes that we don't like to see here, they're very, very expensive. But they're still, relatively speaking, cheap compared to the pride and honor that they took when they built these buildings here. It used to have the Hard Rock Cafe in there. It is not anymore. It's another hotel now. Where did our Hard Rock Hotel and Cafe go, by the way, which used to be on Kalakaua Avenue? I haven't.
It is still in Waikiki. It's on Beach Walk, but it's very low key now. It's no longer the big deal that it used to be back when it first opened in the 80s.
Okay. Yeah, and let's bring the one more slide up, and that will be, we can talk about it, but that's going to be the appetizer for next week, because now they built a brand new building, not unlike the generic blue boxes that we keep talking about here. We see that also. So if anything, we caution the audience to say, for the different climatic reasons, don't uncritically adopt anything from Chicago. But the other reason of doing this exercise here, maybe we understand better where the stuff comes from that we get here, that is truly built to the IBC, which is the International Building Code that was developed for these extremely different temperatures, and that should have been adjusted here. And luckily, we had our hero, Howard Wigg, host of an even longer standing show than ours, that is already long with 280 shows. He's been doing it longer. And through him, we are here. He is the host of Code Green. So thanks to him, we have adopted the code and made it more tropical exotic. So with that, we're at the end of another exciting, roughly 30 minutes. And we're going to walk you through Chicago once we have been completing Boston, which we will do next week again together with Matt Noblet. All right. So until then, please stay easy breezy rather than freezy breezy. Bye-bye.
I will.
Good.
Thank you so much for watching Think Tech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.